All right, I'm going to call to order the code enforcement meeting for July 2020 at 9:10 p.m. Hopefully, I organized the agenda well enough that we'll be able to move through these items fairly quickly. Um, uh, we have, if you don't mind, just quickly entertain me, and we'll do just a quick moment of silence and pledge of allegiance, since this is a entirely separate meeting. You can do the Pledge of Allegiance on your own, and it'll just be a quick moment of silent meditation. All right, I know that was a little bit unorthodox, since we typically count the first, that was 2.5 hours ago. So, so just to be doubly sure, there you have it. Madam Clerk, could I please have roll call?
Or roll call. Chair Erbaum.
Here.
Vice Chair Perella.
Here.
Member Nickerson.
Here.
Also present for the record, Janice Jacoby, Village Clerk. Interim Village Attorney Powell. Chris Yalu, Village Manager. Roman. And that's it. Good.
All right, very good. Would I have a motion for approval of agenda?
Make a motion to approve the agenda, Mr. Chair. I'll second.
Very good. Having a motion and a second, the three of us all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Hearing none, we'll approve the agenda as is. Moving on to the approval of minutes. This is going back to March 3rd of this year. You know, anybody have any comments on those minutes from that time ago? I didn't see anything of significance in terms of egregious errors.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. All in favor of approving the minutes say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Hearing none, the minutes from March 3rd of this year are approved. I will open this up to good and welfare. If there are any residents in attendance who would like to speak at this time, I'll give you a chance now before we get into the weeds of this meeting. If you would like to speak at this moment, I'll give just a few minutes for everyone to figure out if they need to raise a hand or not. All right, I'll keep that screen open so I can have a good view if someone does raise their hand. Seeing none, we'll move on to the agenda items, beginning with G1. I had included essentially almost verbatim entirely what Officer King had provided us back in March when we met in person. And you know, what he had presented to us was fairly concise, but I did kind of break it down. I know it seems a little obnoxious to create so many exhibits out of it. However, just to for ease of understanding where the breaks were and the separation of topics, there is a reason I put temporary structures as the first item to discuss tonight, because it is, ironically, it's kind of a standalone issue. A lot of the other issues tie into each other, and so these first two items, G1 and G2, I feel are kind of self-contained, and so I'll just, for the benefit, Exhibit A is what Officer King had wrote about temporary structures, and it's very straightforward and simple. A clarification of what constitutes a temporary structure is needed. The code exists, but there is no definition what actually is considered a temporary structure. As we get into this, I just want to remind us that tonight what we're talking about are whether or not some of these items should move to Planning and Zoning Committee. We are not talking about sending these items to full council. All of these items discussed need to go through Planning and Zoning. And so seeing that connection, it may be where in the future we actually roll code enforcement committee into planning and zoning committee, but that would be for another time and another discussion entirely. But for this evening, I'd like to just open this up quickly to the panel on what your thoughts or objections might be in terms of bringing this to Planning and Zoning Committee for, just as Officer King outlined, clarification of temporary structures in El Portal. And that would include not just what are they and what defines them, but then, you know, how does that get codified? How, you know, penalties, things like this. There's kind of a larger discussion there. And so if anyone has any comment as to why we should or should not bring this to the attention of planning and zoning.
I mean, I think it probably should be moved to planning and zoning. It's interesting because so many things in planning and zoning and code enforcement, like we already know, they intersect. But code, I don't know, kind of like in my eyes, code kind of focuses on. Code is like the police of what happens in planning and zoning, right? So planning and zoning kind of like develops these things in a way, and then code like polices it. So I think if we think about it like that, then it'll be easier to kind of decide what should move and what shouldn't. Like, are we at the point to where it's ready to be policed, or is it at the point of still like the constructing,
right,
trying to figure out?
So in that, I would remind the committee that all of these issues being discussed tonight are issues that were brought to us by Officer King, saying, "Hey, this has become, you know, a more often recurring issue than some other items." So for me, temporary structure, there's components in there that will address, for example, as we get into some of the other agenda items, everything from someone wants to throw, you know, a party that brings X number of people and they're putting up a tent for shade or rain protection, right? And so that goes hand in hand with an event, right? And so now we have people renting properties in El Portal for filming one thing or another, interior, exterior shots, the whole deal. But you have these temporary structures that are erected, lighting, sometimes stage, things like this. And so, you know, even for myself,
right into code, so
right.
yeah, falls right into code.
And so Officer King's statement is fairly clear. It says a clarification of what constitutes a temporary structure is needed, meaning as he is attempting to police these structures, there's not enough clarification in the code for him to have a foot to really stand on to, you know, tell the resident they do or do not need to make an adjustment, pay a fee for erecting it, or perhaps pay a fine for, you know, things like this. So, I think there's, between events, parties, and other activities in that realm, this is where you know, this comes into play. Even for myself, I've been tearing up my yard for 2 weeks now, trying to put in grass, and I have a tent out that at the beginning I would set it up and take it down every day for shade to work in. But now there's been days where it's been up for like 4 days, and I'm sitting there thinking, oh man, I hope this isn't an eyesore for my neighbors, and I consider that and try and take it down so that, you know, not being obnoxious. But there you go.
All right, so that's perfect, Mr. Chair. If that's the case, then there's nothing that says that we can't have it in both, right? So because Officer King already sees it as a problem, so it needs to stay in code enforcement, but he needs a clarification to know exactly what he's enforcing. So we need to get that from planning and zoning. So right. We just have it in both.
Okay.
And from our point of view, we'll focus on the enforcement part, but we're actually saying in planning and zoning, hey, you guys, which is us anyway, but hey, you guys, like, you know, like you guys as a you know, general term. Hey, you all, you know, planning and zoning committee, I need you guys to hurry up and figure this out because I'm stuck over here in code enforcement because we have this problem that we need to start to enforce in a much better way.
Right.
So we should have both.
Just on the point of need of urgency, I imagine that the Planning and Zoning Committee has a full agenda for this month already. So this is
I don't know. I was just kind of saying that. Yeah.
Fortunately,
Wishful
planning and
thinking,
zoning is
wishful
now
thinking.
meeting. Yeah, but fortunately, planning and zoning is now meeting monthly, so we have a better opportunity, more opportunities. So, um, uh, Councilperson Perrella, do you have any thoughts on this?
No.
Okay. All right. So then I'm gonna, if you'll notice when we get to the end, the tracking report has been whittled down per past discussions. And so we will add temporary structures to the tracking report just to see how it's faring through planning and zoning and what may come of it in terms of better policing. And so, Mr. Attorney, I might ask, do I need a motion to advance this to another committee?
No,
Okay.
Councilperson Obama, it'll just be an unfinished item, that's all.
Very good. All right. Then I'll handle that through email in terms of getting that onto a planning and zoning committee agenda in the future.
And I'll also follow up with the Serbia to see if they have any proposed ordinances that they've worked with that you can consider.
Right. Perfect. Yep. I imagine Juan and Camila certainly have input for us. All right. Then moving right along then to G2, South Florida Water Management District Compliance Guidelines. Madam Manager, I'll take a stab at describing what we're up against here, and then I'll have you correct any of my errors. So going back to 2010, the South Florida Water Management District issued guidelines for specifically lawn maintenance, but it's water conservation. And so then going to 2014, we have kind of a notice letting people know, hey, you know, you need to be in compliance with this, or you should be in compliance with this. And now here at this point in time, whatever municipalities in the different jurisdictions of that management district that do not have ordinances that are speaking to what the water conservation guidelines are, they are now reaching out to us to say, heads up, you don't have an ordinance that keeps you in compliance with this aspect of the water management. And so they are encouraging us to do so. In a nutshell, Madam Manager, is that more or less what we're looking at here?
Yes, that is correct. We don't have an ordinance for this. The South Florida Water Management District did pass this and is encouraging us to do the same. So I brought it to your attention.
Yes.
It's code.
And so I imagine that if an ordinance is required, this is also going to show up in front of the Planning and Zoning Committee to create that ordinance. And then we would need to be tracking this within code enforcement. Is that, I'm sorry, do I have that correct?
Yeah, no, if I may interject, no,
Yeah.
this does not have to go before the planning and zoning,
Okay.
but this would be something that you would just direct me to prepare proposed ordinance
And
for
go
the
in front of
next.
full council.
It's going to require 2 readings.
Okay.
So I would just pretty much draft an ordinance similar to what the proposed or model ordinance is for the council consideration, and we could probably get it on the next council meeting at the end of July for the first reading.
Okay, so I just also would like to say to the committee, don't be surprised if there is some blowback from this as residents learn of this. So that means that we're going to need to be kind of a heads up with communication to the residents, because as is, it's not that it's an ultimatum, but we are going to end up with an ordinance that complies with the Water Management District's guidelines for water conservation, specifically as it pertains to watering lawns. And so that could be a shock or a surprise to many of our residents when we actually start enforcing that, you know, as the ordinance comes on the book. So there should be a plan for communication to the residents, along with, you know, in congruence with the reality of an ordinance that is impending that could affect people's compliance with code enforcement. Does any, yeah, please, Madam Manager, go ahead.
May I add to that? You're right, a communication strategy actually is already, not in place so far. We do have it on our website though. I mean, it's
Okay.
now regulated by the state and the county. So we can still write up violations on behalf, or the county can, but we would want to have our own.
Sure.
This is the way that the village can also participate in water conservation. As part of our comprehensive plan, we also need to do a water supply plan. In that, we have to talk about what we're doing to conserve. So this is
Okay.
falls in line with what we're required to do anyway. So it's good that we let our community know, and you're right, there may be some pushback, but we do have it on the website now. And as you pass this through your committee and onto the council,
We'll get those
that'll
better.
be more public notice.
Okay. And then as perhaps the resiliency task force comes on board too, that could be on their radar in terms of
Absolutely.
something to be able to assist with, reporting and tracking. So, okay. In that case, then among the committee here, is there anyone who would like to talk on this topic? Okay. Do I have anyone from the attendees, the residents? If anyone, I'll close the meeting and open it up to public comment. If anyone has any input, questions, concerns, compliments, or complaints on this issue. All right, I don't see any, and so I would ask for a motion to move this to the full council for consideration.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to move this to the full council.
Very good. Mr. Perrello, do you want to make a second?
Yes, I'll second.
Sorry, that's okay. It's late. It's very late. So, all right. All in favor then of moving agenda item G2 to the full council for consideration?
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yes,
I
yes,
think we
please, yes.
should vote on this, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry.
I think we should vote on this for the record.
For the record, okay. Fair.
Yeah, for the record, we should have a vote on this. Oh,
Fair.
sorry.
And if I may, just amending the motion to direct the village attorney to propose a draft ordinance for the full council's consideration.
Okay, did you catch that, Vice Mayor Nickerson? Oh, I think you muted yourself. No, you're still muted.
Mr. Attorney, do you want me to repeat exactly what you said, Mr. Attorney?
Yes, thank you.
Say it again for me, Mr. Attorney.
The motion is to direct the village attorney to propose a draft ordinance consistent with the South Florida Water Management District's model water shortage ordinance for the council's consideration at the July council meeting.
Wow, okay. So I want to make a motion to amend the ordinance to allow the attorney, what am I doing, Mr. Attorney?
Just say ditto.
Ditto. That's the motion I'm making, exactly what he said. The man knows what he's talking about. Do I do it? That's my motion, Mr. Chair.
And there's been a motion to amend that motion. I can second that. Is that correct?
Right.
Yeah, I'll second that motion. Okay. And so then, do I need to pass,
Roll call, Mr.
do I need to
Chair.
pass these separately?
No, it's all one.
No,
All
it's
one.
It's one.
Okay, very good. All right. Madam Clerk, could I please have roll?
Roll call. Member Nickerson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Perrella,
Yes.
Chair Urban.
Yes.
Motion passes 3-0.
All right. Very good. Okay, so as we look at items G3, G4, and G5, I've put these three at the end of the agenda because they are closely related to each other. As you look ahead to G5 and look at short-term rentals and understand what a large discussion that is, let's back up here to G3, exterior features, appendages, and pertinences. So again, this item G3 regarding exterior features comes again from Officer King and what he's been experiencing as he's been out issuing citations. And so for me, as we look at this ties into hurricane preparedness because it's less debris that becomes available for hurricane to toss around. It goes to our the hazards that we have on our tracking report because it speaks to all kinds of different hazards from electrical to pests and things like this. And so this is kind of an all-encompassing aspect of what he's talking about here. So this again, I believe is something that we are going to discuss as to whether or not we should pass along to planning and zoning, because there will need to be some very specific language, most of which is already contained within Exhibit D that you should have received in an email. If not, I'll make sure I'll get it to you guys. Again, going back to March, the document that Officer King had given us, this is essentially that. All of these exhibits are that document, just broken down into the individual subjects. So this discusses overhang extensions, all canopies, marquees, signs, metal awnings, fire escapes, standpipes, exhaust ducts. Okay, almost anything that you can imagine that hangs off the outside of a building and is still partially attached to that building is what we're talking about. Stairways, decks, porches, balconies, every exterior stairway, chimneys, towers, windows and door frames. Every window, door, and frame shall be kept in sound condition, good repair, and weather tight. All of these issues speak to public safety. And so, again, Officer King is not saying, I can't cite people for these things. What he's saying is the language in our ordinances are not specific enough. And so, as the update to the not charrette, but Pluserbia, everything that they're working on, again, we're sure that they have items already in their pipeline to discuss these. They may already have language there. But this is, again, coming from our code enforcement officer who's saying he's having a hard time properly citing people for these because the language isn't clear enough. Either the resident can argue, well, the language isn't clear enough, I don't have to come into compliance. Or they're arguing that, you know, whatever fines are issued are not valid, right? So either way, we're putting our officer a little bit in between a rock and a hard place, and he's letting us know. And so it covers a lot of items, this issue. However, they all do fit neatly into one category, and that is exterior. Addition is the wrong word, to be appendage or appurtenance. And so is there any discussion from within the committee in terms of what all this means, or does anybody need more clarification on this topic? Okay. In that case, then I would close the meeting and open it to anybody in the public. If anyone needed to raise their hand and comment on this, now would be the time to do so. Again, I'll try and keep my my display visible if anyone does raise their hand, but seeing none, okay, so again, since we're passing it to another committee, we're not necessarily taking a vote to move to full council or anything like that. So in that case, then what I will do is I will add this as well to the tracking report, and then contact the chair of planning and zoning and find out when we might be able to have a discussion on this topic at one of those committee meetings. Is everybody kind of understanding of what our path is with this item? Very good. All right. Not too bad so far. Moving through. All right. In almost the exact same fashion as items G1 and G3, item G4 is pest control. Again, this is coming from our code enforcement officer, who is telling us that this is a particular issue that needs more clarification within the code. I really, I like this. I like what he's giving us. It makes a lot. The first sentence is the best one. All structures shall be kept free from insect and vermin infestation. I think everybody can be on board with that. So this is going to address the derelict homes. This is going to address abandoned vehicles, debris piles. This is the reason primarily that people are concerned for their health and safety when they see an abandoned home, an abandoned car, or a debris pile. Is the concern for infestation. So he has it broken down by owner, single occupant, multiple occupancy, right? And so we have a very complete guideline from our officer to go with here. And so is there any discussion among the council as what is needed regarding clarification within our code for infestations? All right. I would close the meeting now and ask for anyone from the public to raise their hand and comment on this topic. I see Jairo. All right. I think I'm bringing you over. If you would unmute yourself and then just state your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, good evening.
Hi, good evening. Hi, Jay Ribeiro, 225 Northeast 86th Street. I'm reading this Exhibit E. You just mentioned about abandoned property and abandoned cars. That's not specified in here. You're talking about in what this is typed up is infestation, and exterminated, proper process, and so forth. This needs to be more clarified into speaking about abandoned property and abandoned cars. I have reported that multiple times and it's been out there and no one has done anything. The cars or the houses get moved from one side of the parking lot to the house to the other, or the house maintains the roof in a unsafe structure. So if you're talking about that, this Exhibit E needs to be updated. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Yes, I'm taking notes as you're talking here. And so just for clarification, what I'm talking about is this would give us, I agree that more specific language needs to be put in, but this would give us one more tool to deal with abandoned properties, abandoned cars, and debris piles. So so it might be the only way that this helps with an abandoned car situation, for example, is if it could be determined that there was either some sort of animal or vermin that had taken up residence in that vehicle. Then that gives us another tool to be able to deal with that problem. So forgive me, I'm not presenting this as an outright solution to specifically abandoned vehicles and debris piles, but I am taking notes that we need to have more specific language to include those in here. I agree that it's not explicitly put in the notes that Officer King left us. And so I will put those notes in and make sure that that's part of the discussion as we go to planning and zoning with this.
Yes, please, because I mean, if you're not using specific language with that, in fact, your quote unquote code enforcement officer or village official, from what I've been told, cannot approach the property, enter a property, or touch a vehicle that's been parked in front of a property. So if you do not do specific language, nobody's going to pay attention to that, and there's no way you're going to remediate this problem.
Yes, I agree completely.
Thank you.
And yep, thank you sincerely. So, you know, a lot of these issues that are being addressed through Pluserbia urban planners, for example, have to do with lack of explicit language in our code. So we're certainly hoping to be able to address a lot of those deficiencies in terms of specificity as we upgrade or update the code with the urban planners. And I do have that in my notes. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks.
All right. Is there anybody else who wish to speak on this topic? All right, I'll leave my panel open in case I see a hand go up, but seeing none. Back to the committee here. I'm sorry, I'm just switching screens so I can see where I'm at. Okay, there we have it. All right, so this would be the same procedure essentially for item G1 and G3. And so that would be to include this in our tracking report among code enforcement so we can see the progress on this. And then I will be bringing this to the chair of planning and zoning to try and get this included in short order with many of the things that we're trying to prioritize in terms of updates through Pluserbia and our urban planners. Does anybody in the committee have anything additional to add to that? Let's see, I've got, Yes, Vice Mayor Nicholson.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes.
I just want to be clear for everybody who's watching, everybody who's listening. When the chair says that he's going to be contacting the chair of planning and zoning, the chair does not mean that he will be contacting the chair of planning and zoning away from a planning and zoning meeting, because that would be a sunshine violation. That is not what the chair is talking about right now. Mr. Chair is saying that what he will do is he will go through the clerk to add those things to the planning and zoning agenda or tracking report. And then when we get the planning and zoning agenda and tracking report, as a planning and zoning committee, we will all then discuss what we're going to do with that item, if it should remain on the tracking report or what we're going to do there. That is what the chair is talking about, just for clarification for anybody who's watching.
This is true. As a novice to politics, I'm realizing that I do use implied language more than I should. So, thank you, Vice Mayor, for clarifying that. That is in fact the case. All right, very good. All right, now moving on to the topic that we might end up spending a little more time on here is short-term rentals. And so regarding this, the reason I put all of the other agenda items before this is because they all tie into this. So just quickly to understand that this issue of short-term rentals has been brought to our attention, not just by Code Enforcement Officer King, but as well by our village manager and others. Residents have brought this up as well. So, so what Officer King has told us is that since the last code update, there has been an increase in short-term rental properties. Mainly companies like Airbnb have come into existence, which under our current code is not regulated by any ordinance, et cetera, et cetera. So as we look at regulating short-term rentals, you know, we say Airbnb because people have a clear picture in their mind of what that is. And that is a very good example of what a short-term rental is. And so I would also include in short-term rentals, production companies. Who are coming into the village certainly qualify as short-term rentals. And so in that discussion, there's going to need to be language in the ordinances regarding temporary structures, exterior features in terms of, you know, the safety of the building that you're bringing, you know, in terms of liability. So now you're bringing an outside entity into this property within the village. And if things like, you know, the exterior features are not in good working order or otherwise deteriorated, now you have a situation where someone's going to get sued, and they're going to say, well, why was there nothing that required them to have their property up to code, for example, right? So temporary structures, exterior features, and then, you know, pest control, these all tie into, are we in a position to be able to regulate short-term rentals? It's not just a matter of, are we going to get a fee from the rental? It's not going to be that simple for short-term rentals. We, as a village, we need to make sure that we have different angles of liability examined and considered, and then addressed, meaning we have all of our ducks in a row to be able to then regulate, enforce short-term rentals. And so this is a potential opportunity for the village to gain additional revenue as well. You know, it may not sound good to put it that way to residents, but the bottom line, that is. So in terms, like Miami Beach, for example, has a 2% hotel tax. Well, we're not in a tourist zone that allows us to do something like that, but we are in a position where we would be able to raise revenues off of people who are running businesses within this village in terms of short-term rentals. And then, for example, I've noticed more and more production companies around the village because there's no fees for them to operate here yet. It's incredible. It's whatever deal they work out with the owner is all they have to pay. There's nothing else for them to consider. I don't think the owners within the village are fully aware of the liability that they're putting themselves in, the risk of liability that they're putting themselves in to do that, to rent a property out to a production company. And just kind of cross your fingers and hope nothing goes wrong. And so, so I don't want us to just say, yes, we short-term rentals, let's put a fine on there, you know, sign up, that's it, we're done. I think we seriously need to understand, you know, how our ordinances are already structured. Are they already in a place where we can then effectively, you know, police and regulate short-term rentals through code enforcement? So I'll open up to the committee here for additional comments.
Oh yeah, there's there's definitely something that we have to do about short-term rentals. And as you said, also about the production companies, there's a particular here on 89, closer to North Miami Avenue, which has been a few times where, there's a large, production going on there, and they take up like almost a whole block, and like setting up tents and barbecues and stuff all along the street, which is, like you said, that could be a liability. As far as short-term rentals, it is becoming a problem, and to me, it's some sort of like unsafe environment, if you call it that way, if you can call it that way, because you don't know who actually is coming to the village. This is a residential community. We're very small. We're only like, what, 800 residents in El Portal in total, 800 houses, something like that. So having that many rentals, more than 30, it's a little bit alarming, and not having regulation, and like you said, not having at least an income like Miami Shores does. The licensing just to get a permit is $750 for the first year, and then $500 sequentially to renovate. Like I'm not, it's and the problem is that we have investors buying houses and renting the whole house, which that could become a problem. I mean, we're in a very strategic location where we're very close to the beach, we're very close to Midtown, Wynwood, and all of the good stuff stuff that's happening here in Miami. So we have to do something about it, because a lot of the investors, more than residents, are actually getting a good grab of this, we definitely need to do something about it. And there's I checked many municipalities, and they all have regulations for it. There's a few that they don't allow short-term rental at all, and there's some that has to be minimum of 6 months. And like I said, there's another municipality that charge $1,500 for the first licensing, and they have to be, registered with a tax collector and having licensing, because there's people making money out of it. So they're running a business within their residence. So it's a residential, community. So, and also, which it brings me also to like code enforcement, as far as, are those units all up to code? Because I've seen so many units with full kitchens.
Right, that's one of my concerns, is that
And
something happens on the
yes, do
property.
they have anyone pull out a permit for all those? Because if you look at many pictures, it looks like everything has been renovated, brand new bathrooms and kitchens, and to have any of these property owners have pull up permits to fix their properties. Is it legal to have a second kitchen or 3 kitchens within the same dwelling or same property? I don't think that is allowed, other than a wet bar. So, and when you look at all these Airbnb rentals, it's kind of like overwhelming, the amount of like
I share your concerns. Attorney Powell, I think you had your hand up to let us know something.
Well, I was just going to speak generally, because this is one of those areas that's really evolving all the time. But when we use the term regulate, the legislature, there's like a point in time where things got divided. And this was back in 2011. And I didn't really have an opportunity to sit with you, Councilperson Urban, to go over this in detail, but I'm sure this evolves. We'll be able to do that. But before 2011, municipalities across the board were free to regulate short-term vacation rentals like Miami Beach and others. The legislature passed a statute that after 2011, unless you had adopted an ordinance that regulated short-term vacation rentals, you were preempted from doing that. They softened that a couple of years later. I believe that was maybe 2014 or 15, where they now, the statutes now allow municipalities to pass ordinances that go to some of the things we're talking about, where you can charge a fee for permitting. But most of those regulations, if we're going to use that word, or requirements that the municipalities still have the ability to deal with short-term vacation rentals, involves noise, parking, trash, life safety issues, noise ordinances and the like. And the ordinances I've worked on and dealt with that have passed muster do include penalties for violation. So as Councilperson Perrella was discussing before, if you have one of these facilities, they obviously have to have passed the building department. They obviously have to have drawn the proper permits. And if you didn't, obviously that goes towards the areas where municipalities still maintain the ability to make sure that these types of structures or these types of ventures are complying with the health, safety, and regulatory issues that the municipality is concerned about. So, I'll send you some of the information, and as we move further, some of the ordinances that have passed muster. Some of the things that, works is you look at the reasonableness of the fines. I mean, one of the things you don't want to do is, propose fines that are exorbitant and then somebody challenges it and you're back to square one. So a lot of times municipalities that are looking to delve into this area will look at what's going on around in the locality. What's the average fines that other municipalities have had on their books for a while that they've been tested. So in that way, you don't really, pass something that's going to be immediately challenged by like an Airbnb or some type of outfit like that that's looking to profit from the fact that a locality does not have regulatory framework for short-term vacation rentals.
Okay, so this has to do with like the home rule legislations and things.
Well, not. I mean, I guess you can liken it to that, but
Okay.
like I mentioned before, it's like, these things got popular really quickly. Folks that had condos
Right.
and houses as investments.
They were already
They
the
weren't
third,
selling
fourth
them. They
one,
just said,
yeah.
okay, we'll just rent them out for days or weekends or whatever. And then, the problem with these things is, villages have found out in municipalities is that you've got hotels next door, and every week you've got people coming in from all over the place, creating all kinds of havocs. And I mean, you could just go to any Google search and you'll see what
Sure.
kinds
Sure.
of craziness goes on with these short-term vacation rentals. But having said that, there still is just a very defined pathway that's continues to evolve at the legislative level, where the municipalities who were not grandfathered in because they didn't have ordinances on the books prior to 2011 can regulate. And so that's the area where we'll be looking to make sure that we can step in to propose permitting requirements, making sure you're complying with noise ordinance, trash, parking. I mean, obviously, if you have one of these short-term vacation rentals, you don't want folks parking all over the place and the like.
So what you're saying is we may not be able to license such things, but in terms of regulation, whatever ordinances we have in place will determine what our recourse could be in terms of correcting either correcting behavior or collecting fees or fines. Is that right?
We certainly can license them.
Okay.
We certainly can pass an ordinance that says, if
That
1,000,
ordinance just needs to be.
and then we can
outrageously
certainly,
clear.
part of that licensing can ensure that obviously you pay the fee, that our code enforcement goes by and inspects to make sure that whatever framework we create, that particular owner and that particular site is complying with it. And if you don't, then we can also have penalties for not complying with those conditions that we adopt.
Okay. All right, very good. So in addition then to the items we were talking about tonight, then it sounds like another item that we may need to bring on for the next agenda and to include in this discussion would be issues of, as Councilperson Perrella was saying, like, crowd overflow, vehicles blocking through lanes, and things to that nature. Would be included in that in terms of effective ordinancing and then enforcing. All right, thank you very much. That's incredibly helpful for clarification. Anyone? Yes, Madam Manager, please go ahead.
This is a point of clarification. We were discussing that others were renting or utilizing people's homes for filming and were doing what they wanted to. We do have an interlocal agreement with the Miami-Dade County Film and Arts Commission. Okay. Where that is regulated, and they must get a permit from the county, and then the county contacts us. They have to hire an off-duty police officer, and there are regulations. I mean, that is being regulated. So if some filming is going on that I'm not aware of, I mean, we get these calls often enough, but I haven't had them in a while, and obviously through COVID they haven't been doing any filming. But if anyone ever sees that happening, please contact us, because that's enforceable. We can shut that down.
Okay, that's really good to know. Do we have any revenue from any of those activities?
Well, the revenue is for the off-duty police officer, and that's
fair enough. All right. All right, very good. My fellow committee members, is there anything else? Okay, I've got Stephanie. I'll close the meeting among the committee and open it up to the public. Looks like I have Stephanie Kinzel looking to come on. Just please unmute yourself and then give your name and address for the record, if you would.
Sorry, I had to figure out how to do that. Stephanie Kinzel, 7535 Southwest 26th Court in Davie, Florida, 33314. I did some research on the short-term rentals because I know in North Miami Beach, my former city, they did a lot of regulation and business tax receipts for that, because whenever you operate a business, even if it's in a residential property, it's still a business, and it's when commerce is being conducted. The county has County Ordinance 17-78, which says that responsible parties have to obtain a certificate of use, and you can find those documents on the county's website. And you're one of the few cities that I'm aware of, municipalities I should say, that does not have a certificate of use for these short-term rentals, and I think you're missing out on a lot of revenue. Also, I believe you were talking about the filming. That's also huge. One last thing, and then I'll let you go. The state of Florida also has sales tax on short-term rentals, and it is very important for these business owners of the short-term rentals to register with the state of Florida for sales and use tax on rental of living and sleeping accommodations. They have applications on their website at myflorida.com/DOR. And I just wanted to give you my input, and I guess that's it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you sincerely. All right. I took notes on all of that. Yes, I believe Jairo would like to come on and speak to this. I believe I brought him over. If you would, just one more time for posterity, please state your name and address for the record. You're not unmuted yet.
Okay.
There we go. Me? Yes.
Yes, this is Jay Ribeiro, 225 Northeast 86th Street. It it has been 3 years that I have made concerns about the short-term Airbnb that is next to my property. 6/22/20, I had to write an email to our chief of police. I had to call the police 3 times, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. I had to waste our village resources because of the ineptitude of this code enforcement passing whatever necessary laws or regulations. You need to implement something now, and you need to implement it immediately, because this property on 6/22 were firing fireworks that sounded like bombs, and it had fire, which could have landed in one of the trees in the back, an old oak tree. We could have had a major fire. I had concerns. Those fireworks were very loud. I have soundproof windows and I could still hear it inside my house. So you guys need to move, and you need to move fast. I am 3 years into this, fighting with you guys about this. You've done nothing. You have changed committee members so many times. You have made promises and nothing has been done. So please get your short-term rental regulations, mandates, follow the state rules. Since you're not grandfather, do something and do it fast. Thank you.
You got it. Duly noted. All right. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this topic? All right. I'll leave my window open here in case I see a hand go up. Coming back to closing public comment and coming back to committee. My concern with moving this straight to council right now is that we don't have our other ducks in a row in terms of other ordinances that need, in my opinion, to be in place to make this effective. So the question for me, and I'm happy to have comment to help me through this, is do we send this to Planning and Zoning Committee, or do we just bring this to the council and bring this discussion straight to the full council? Comments from the committee, please.
I think it should be brought to a full council. It's not gonna, because then everybody will be able to voice their opinion.
All
As
right.
a council member.
Sure. Vice Mayor Nickerson.
Mr. Chair, it doesn't, whatever you guys feel like you want to do, you know, if you feel like it's not worked enough, then you might want to send it to the committee. If you feel like there's things that are still missing where it's not worked enough, you might want to send it to committee. Just so that, you know, because usually the way we try to do it is that, you know, when it goes to council, all the kinks and it's been worked enough to where when it gets to council, then it's like, you get an overall kind of vision of, do I like this, do I not like this? But we usually go to council with something whole to present. Now, I don't disagree with Councilperson Farrella. I think it's a good idea. What I will say to Councilperson Farrella is that for all of us, because you said you wanted to go to full council, for all of us to be able to have our input and work it, but we're all on the Planning and Zoning Committee, so.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? So we're all on the zoning committee. So if we want to work it as far as keeping it in a committee, and you want, it's kind of like the in-between area, right?
Enforcement, yeah.
You know, and we want everybody to be involved, so we can just send it to committee, and we'll do both of those things if you guys want to.
So my concern with sending it to Planning and Zoning Committee is that because that agenda docket, however you put it, the load is so great on Planning and Zoning already, that I feel that if we did bring this to the full council, that we have a good chance of coming up with a well-rounded ordinance that addresses many of the things we talked about tonight. Go ahead, Vice Mayor Nickerson.
Sorry about that, Mr. Chair. So what I would
We're gonna
suggest
discuss this.
is there something that the attorney can come up with that satisfies us, and then we can send it to the full
Yes,
council.
that could be good.
Mr. Attorney, go ahead and
Yeah,
address it if you
well,
like.
I mean, I think we're talking about the steps to get to the eventual adoption of some ordinance that deals with short-term vacation rentals. So I would think that you all can task me with the duty to prepare a proposed short-term vacation rental ordinance, either for this committee's consideration, because it's kind of a hybrid between code enforcement and planning and zoning, or proposed for the planning and zoning's following meeting for consideration, so that all of the members can consider it. But either way, you're gonna have to have like a product of a proposed ordinance, at least as a base that you all have discussed to move forward. And right now we don't have that. Right now we just have a general discussion. So, you know, that's another things to do. I can, you know, work on and circulate that for ideas. As I mentioned, this thing is, this area is very fluid. My main concern in making sure that whatever we do is not so much the categories of areas that we can regulate, to use that word, because it's fairly concrete. It's making sure that whatever fines for violations that we adopt in that ordinance are consistent with what's percolating through the Florida legislature right now as being reasonable.
All right. So having heard that, in my mind, I was thinking if we push this through to full council, it honestly would make sense to push for the August, or we're not meeting in August. So we're, okay. So this is a little bit of a challenge. Yeah, go ahead, Vice Mayor Nickerson, please.
So Mr. Chair, so if there is, if right now, if you can, you know, kind of go tunnel vision with exactly what you like feel like you wanted to say.
Right. So what I'm trying to say is, if there would,
Mr. Attorney, maybe, you know what I'm saying, you can, because there might be certain points that the chair will say to where you can grab those certain points to create an ordinance out of that we can take to the full council.
Yeah, I mean, what we're talking about is creating an ordinance that deals with kind of like what we were just talking about with the water conservation. We're talking about creating an ordinance to be included in the village's code that regulates this particular area. And so that's going to have, you know, areas that either this committee or the planning and zoning committee is going to want to at least discuss or workshop. You know, there'll be 2 readings, but I'll draft something either for this committee or the planning and zoning committee. Just tell me which one, you know, you want it for, and I'll propose it.
Since we're here, go ahead, Madam Mr. Chair.
I was going to say with the August break, that perhaps our best chance at having a complete, well-rounded ordinance in a timely manner might be to make a motion for a comprehensive ordinance addressing short-term rentals and the code enforcement concerns around the short-term rentals being presented for discussion and consideration to the full council, because as you said, all 5 members are in both the committee and the council. We're looking at an August recess, so may as well get this discussion started in the full council and move towards the objective. And so at this point, I would be more than happy to consider a motion to move this to full council.
Mr. Chair, if I may. Yeah, I have no problem making a motion. We just need to figure out exactly what that motion, that ordinance is going to say, so we can make a motion exactly for that ordinance.
It sounds, if I can interject, Mr. Chair, it sounds like the motion is directing the attorney to prepare a proposed short-term vacation rental ordinance for the council's consideration, taking into account the discussion today, which would be to completely provide for permitting, regulating, health, safety, parking, noise, all of the things that would normally go into one of these ordinances for the full council's consideration. That would include, as Council Perrella alluded to, licensing, fines for violations, renewals, and I believe Ms. Kinzel also talked about some of the things, making sure you comply with the legislative requirements. All that will be in the proposed ordinance. And again, it's going to take 2 readings. So, like we've seen before in the past, the first ordinance is always going to be a work in progress. So we'll have the ordinance, there'll be discussion, there may be a workshop, there'll be amendments, and then there'll be a second reading and a final adoption. So there's going to be a road that it travels along to get to its final approval.
Yeah, I don't know if soup to nuts is an official legal statement, but we're looking for a soup to nuts ordinance, I believe is what we're looking for. Does that help, Vice Mayor Nickerson?
Yes, Mr. Chair, was that ordinance exactly was that more or less what you wanted to say?
Indeed.
So I'd like to make a motion for that ordinance, Mr. Attorney, that you just read into the record.
Ditto.
Ditto.
Very good. Would there be a second to that motion?
Yes, I'll second.
Very good. Having a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Or so forgive me. Let's do this properly so we don't have any negative recourse. Madam Clerk, would it be possible to get roll call on this?
Roll call. Member Nickerson.
Yes.
Vice Chair Perrella.
Yes.
Chair Urban.
Yes.
Motion passes 3-0.
All right. Very good. Moving right along to the tracking report. So after the discussion that we just had, I would say that what I'll do with the tracking report that has been whittled down to just the 2 items, instead of adding 3 more items to be tracked in the tracking report, I'll really just add short-term rentals to the tracking report, and we can follow along with temporary structures, exterior features, and pest control within that because no one's going to be able to have a short-term rental without knowing where they stand on those 3 items. So if that's agreeable, I'll just be adding 1 item to the tracking report, which would be the short-term rentals and encompassing issues, and that way we can keep the tracking report simplified since we've come so far to make that happen. Any discussion regarding the tracking report on the committee? Very good. All right. I would like to give just one last opportunity for anybody in the audience, residents or otherwise, who did want to comment on anything at all that we discussed tonight. This would be your opportunity during good and welfare to speak to any topic that you feel is important. All right, seeing none, I would move right along to ask if there might be a motion for adjournment.
I'll make a motion to adjourn, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. All in favor of the motion and second, say aye. Aye. All right. Any opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the Code Enforcement Committee meeting for July 2020 is adjourned at 10:13 p.m.